General Medicaid warning. The views expressed in 5-ish minute lore, the lore delivered in rants, are sanctioned by their scholar progenium as excess rageous. Prolonged exposure can result in loss of IQ, high blood pressure, random outbursts, and blunt force trauma to the skull, resulting in unconsciousness. Please consult your local physician for more information.
Aeldari Spirit Stones. A chastity belt for the soul. And the favourite drug of Slaneshi cultists everywhere.
Spirit stone there. Can I put it in my mouth and cover it in saliva?
These days, the Aeldari have a lower population than a one-horse town with no vet, but that hasn't been the case, technically, for that long in the cosmic scale. Back when the Aeldari were not an endangered species and hadn't screwed up everything literally through a combination of arrogance and self-indulgence, they were pretty much immortal. I don't mean they were physically immortal, even though their lifespans are flat out ridiculous, with some of the Eldar having been alive during the Great Crusade, and those same Eldar are still able to thumb their noses at the Imperium now. I mean that they were psychically immortal. Before they screwed it all up, the Aeldari were able to physically die and just hang out in the warp until they decided they would be born into another body. That leads to some really uncomfortable thoughts about just how exactly, when and where they would peek in on their future parents and decide who was going to both sire them and give birth to them. In fact, that's probably why Slaanesh is the way that Slaanesh is. I have ruined your entire day, and if you can't still figure it out, just pause until you cringe so hard your back cracks. You are now welcome. Well, speaking of Slaanesh, when the bouncing baby whatever the hell was born, the Eldar found out rather quickly that when they died, they would no longer go to hang out in the warp until they decided to come back to reality. They found out that nothing but existence of pure and absolute horror awaited them. This understanding in and of itself led to the entire species trying to figure out how to not wind up being the soul food of a hungry warp-spawned horror of their own creation. The first step in this process was trying to find out a way to stop the psychic essences of the Eldar from entering the warp on death, which is not an easy prospect. Well, the Eldar figured out a way. It is said on repeat that desperate times call for desperate measures, and the Eldar were beyond desperate. I would be desperate too if I died, and the first words I heard when I woke up was, "Who wants Daddy's belt?" They were doing everything they could to try to find a way to save themselves when a Farseer named Melindri Silver Soul from the craft world of Iliaden found out how to save the Eldar from being snatched up on death. When she told her fellow Eldar what her thoughts were, I can only imagine the pucker factor, because while I normally consider most Eldar tight asses at the best of times, by the end of that conversation I can say without hesitation, they were all well and truly crapping diamonds from the amount of compression involved. To make it absolutely 100% clear, what she was recommending was so insanely dangerous that even a Kriegsguardsman would pause, stick his head up, and ask for clarification. Melindri looked at her fellow Eldar, who were literally terrified of dying, and told them that to protect their souls, they needed to go to the heart of the old Aeldari Empire, to a place now known as the Crone Worlds. It sounds so simple, until you remember that the Crone Worlds were all swallowed by the Eye of Terror, and now literally sit in Slaanesh's backyard. And also the fact that the second the Eldar showed up in the warp, legitimately everything there would notice. Believe me, I tried coming up with a metaphor for how absolutely horrifying this would be to the Eldar, but words absolutely pale. And there's not a single comparison I could draw up that wouldn't get my channel demonetized, and I wouldn't have a single argument against it. It's that messed up. It's that bad. What should be even more telling is the entirety of Craftworld society not only believed her, but accepted her proposal and went along with it. The Eldar set out en masse for the Eye of Terror to recover specialized gems from the surface of the Crone Worlds that could be modified to protect the Eldar soul from being sucked into the warp. The death toll was gobsmackingly hilarious by any standard, but the Eldar now had a surplus of what are called Waystones, and with the help of specialized bone singers of the Craft Worlds, they were adapted into the first Eldar Spirit Stones. Spirit Stones became permanent fixture of Eldar fashion and armor, and with disgustingly good reason. Anytime an Eldar dies, the Spirit Stone acts as a trap, drawing the soul of the Eldar inside and keeping it contained. This keeps the soul in real space and out of the warp, and thus away from the grasping teeth of the warp, and in particular, Slaanesh. But what to do now? All you've done at this point is make a very pretty prison, and although it's societally better than having your soul chewed on for a few 100,000 years by the warp, you're still in solitary confinement inside of a gem the shape of an oversized almond. Not only that, the Spirit Stone is about as fragile as the mood of a shotgun wedding. In other words, congratulations, you've been saved from having your soul immediately devoured by Slaanesh. Now imagine how screwed up and terrified you'd be if the only thing keeping you from the same fate as before is a glass bottle that cracks if it's stared at hard. Well, Melandri had a solution to that too. At the core of every Aeldari craft world is a psychically networked apparatus that, with a few tweaks, would not only allow the dead Eldar to remain secure, but would give them the ability to help their species in the future. As with anything the Eldar do, they can't just pop it in and it's good enough. The craft world Eldar have a relationship with their building material that borders on the obsessive, but given what they can do with it, I can't say I really blame them. Remember how I said the Aeldari use bone singers? Well, their building material is called Wraithbone, and bone singers literally sing what they want to build into being built. Imagine a voice so horrible that wood literally decides to become a door to appease the horrible voice, and you've got the right idea. Upon an Eldar dying and the soul being captured into a spirit zone, this is what these bone singers do. They go to one of the craft world's biodomes in a place called the Dome of the Crystal Seers. In places like these in the craft world, the actual wraith bone of the craft world itself is exposed, and when the spirit stone is placed there, apparently a tree of wraith bone is shaped around it. This might sound strange, but at the same time, it literally surrounds the spirit stone in the same material they make their ships out of, and everything else for that matter, including their version of Titans. The second that this happens, the soul can leave the spirit stone and join what is now known as the Infinity Circuit. At the end of the day, the Infinity Circuit now exists as two things: an afterlife for the Eldar dead, and a pool of pure psychic energy that can be drawn from to both power and assist the craft world if it's needed. Not only that, if the need comes, a dead Eldar can re-inhabit their spirit stone and opt to be put inside of a Wraithbone construct, which is literally a dead Eldar wanting to help other creatures join it in being past tense. When the craft world Iliaden finished its modifications and planted its first spirit stones, Melandri's Silver Soul gave up her own soul to activate the Infinity Circuit, because of course it would need a soul to turn it on and off again. The invention, risk, and outright need for the Infinity Circuit as well as the Spirit Stones themselves have given the Eldar some small measure of peace when it comes to dying, but a small peace is all they can expect. It also has a secondary knock-on effect of ensuring that whoever attacks a craft world will be fighting a species who will fight past the point of any reasoning whatsoever. The Eldar are not just fighting for their homes. If their craft world is attacked, they're fighting for their very souls, and the souls of everyone they've ever cared about. At the end of the day, that makes attacking an Eldar craft world one of the most dangerous things you can possibly do.